Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, March 25th, 2025, 9 a.m. in council chambers. So can I check, are there any late items? Mrs. Robinson, thank you. So could I please have the approval of the agenda? Councillor Chong, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. And the adoption of some minutes, those would be the Committee of the Whole minutes from March 11th, 2025. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Chong, all in favor? Thank you. And first off today, we have a delegation from Canadian Legion number 173 and a presentation by Kevin Webb, the Poppy Chairman. Welcome, Kevin. Please come up to the microphone.
Good morning, Your Worship and Councillors. My name is Kevin Webb and I am the Poppy Chairman at the Canadian Legion back in Osoyoos. I would like to ask permission to use the existing crosswalk outside the Legion building on 78th Avenue to change it to a commemorative crosswalk. This means adding 2 maple leaves and words which will read in English and French in honour of those who served and sacrificed to the existing crosswalk outside the Legion. We would also like to liaise with the operations to plan the best time for this to be completed, preferably after the next painting of the white stripes, as some are broken up. We have provided you with a picture of what the maple leaves and wording would look like on the crosswalk. That came with the invitation. We are not looking at applying for funds, but for the members of the council to give permission for the commemorative crosswalk to be installed and permission for the Legion to coordinate with the operational team going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. I think we may have a couple of questions here.
By all means.
All right. I just wondered, are can I just check, you're providing the stencils?
Yes.
But you're requiring that town staff do the
No.
do the work? No?
No, we'll do it. We just need town staff, to coordinate with the traffic. I don't want to get run over painting maple leaves.
Sure. Oh,
So it would be all the cost is down to the Legion.
perfect. I wasn't sure about that. And the only concern that I have when looking at this is that in this weather and this climate, we need to paint lines and replace flags and so on way more often than in other places. So you do understand that
Oh, yeah.
part that it may.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nice thing is that this is on town property. It's not on the highway, because that was one of the other things that somebody
I
had
did check with that
mentioned.
first.
Yeah, good. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who has any questions? Go ahead, Councillor
Just one
King.
question. If this moves forward, you would maintain it over the years, like the mayor said, it could fade quite a bit in a couple of years?
Yeah, we'll maintain it.
Thank
we just
you.
need basically the town to direct traffic while we
I
paint it. We'll sort the paint out, the stencils, and get your approval on those first.
So you would need to just coordinate with town staff and they would help you set that up, a
Yes.
time and a place. Okay, fair enough. Anybody else? Go ahead, Councillor Chong.
No, I just, in
Oh.
full support, would just like to move this as a recommendation to
Okay,
regular.
thank you. And your Councillor Poderica is seconding that. Anybody else have any more questions first? Okay, all in favor of that recommendation? Thank you. Well,
Thank you
thank you very much.
Thank you
We
for your
look
time.
forward to having that handled soon then. You
Hopefully.
obviously want it before.
But it depends when you're repainting the crosswalk outside. The crosswalk outside the Legion is really badly all cracked at the moment. So it's, if I go and paint it and then you go back and paint it white again, I will not be very happy.
No, don't worry. We wouldn't do that. But I do think that we normally, is it in June, Mr. Risling, that we normally have somebody come and paint? Oh, okay.
Your worship, a lot of times it's even earlier, probably within the next few weeks. We're one of the earlier municipalities just because we don't get much snow here, so we can keep in contact with the.
Great. If you make sure that you've got all the information given to town staff and we can coordinate and make sure that that's done, and we won't let them paint white lines over
Thank you.
it. So maybe just the edges, is that what, so it looks like a crosswalk? Just
No,
not,
the one outside there is just the white lines.
okay,
Memory serves me right. So the words will be painted on the first white step in black, English and French, and then there'll be a bright red maple leaf covering hopefully most of the crosswalk, depending how big the stencil is.
okay, great. And also the words in honor of those who served and sacrificed?
Yeah,
Okay,
They will be in black on a white step,
on this one,
hopefully.
perfect. Thank you very much. Well, we're in favor of that and we'll let you do that with town staff.
So
Thank
they
you
have
very,
delays with the CA operations.
probably, yes, sure, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
very-
you. Thank you
very
so
for your
much.
time.
Thank you. Okay, next is staff reports, the land use procedures bylaw amendment. Would that be Mr. Garish? Thank you very much.
I'll just sorry through the here. I'll just wait for the PowerPoint to come up, and there it is. All right. So the item today before council for consideration is a proposed amendment to the land use procedures bylaw. And it's in relation to amendments to expand the scope of the bylaw to apply to temporary use permits, TUPs for short. And so the authority for a temporary use permit to be issued by council or approved by council is under section 492 of the Local Government Act. And council can designate areas within the town and also specify general conditions that it might apply to anybody who seeks to do a temporary use. And a temporary use is one that's generally contrary to the existing zoning bylaw, which I'll touch on in a moment. Subsequent section of the Act also allows council, once it's approved a TUP, to specify the conditions, have it relate to the construction of buildings, potentially even in relation to parking. There's a number of different things you can do with the tool. It's actually quite effective or flexible depending on how you look at it. As I understand it, the town hasn't historically had temporary use permits as an option available to it. However, with your new official community plan that was adopted in 2022, the OCP did designate all of the town as an area suitable for council to consider the issuance of a temporary use permit. And it also set out basic criteria that was to be used by council when considering requests from property owners seeking an exception to the zoning bylaw. And so some of those policies relate to the compatibility of the proposed use with existing uses in the area, maybe council policies as well, environmental impacts, could existing municipal infrastructure handle the proposed use, positive benefit economically, is it a seasonal or temporary type use? And also, would there be any nuisances for existing uses in the area if council considered an exception to the zoning bylaw? And I mean, this is just for illustrative purposes. Some local governments choose just to allow temporary use permits in certain parts of the municipality, but in the context of Osoyoos, the OCP speaks to throughout the town of Osoyoos, which we understand to mean anywhere within the municipal boundaries. And so an example, just for illustrative purposes, this is a typical zone, medium density, only allows for 3 principal uses. So if somebody came forward and say, for instance, wanted to do a vacation rental, well, it's not currently allowed by zoning. If they didn't want to do a rezoning application, the temporary use permit would be a vehicle by which they could ask council to allow for it on a temporary basis to see if it was viable, or to allow them to relocate if it was an enforcement issue, et cetera, et cetera. So having adopted an OCP that sets out that the town has designated areas for temporary use permits and also has criteria against which it will consider such applications, there's a separate section of the Act that says the council also has to then define procedures by which a property owner can come forward before you and ask for you to consider that type of a temporary use approval. So as council may be aware, you do have a land use procedures bylaw that deals with other types of permits, development permits, development variance permits. But at the moment, the bylaw is almost silent on temporary use permits. It doesn't really speak to them beyond the fact that it establishes a $1,000 fee. So there's some ambiguity there as to how somebody applying for a temporary use permit, their application will be processed. So the amendment before you is basically just to try to address that shortcoming in the bylaw and to clarify that the scope of the bylaw does apply to temporary use permits in the same way it does to development permits and also development variance permits. And also to establish that yes, TUPs are to be notified in the same way as development variance permits. And also to clarify that permits, and so this is a bit beyond just TUPs, but permits in general don't require the same site notices that a rezoning does, and that's just a clarification point. So summing it up, a couple options before council. We believe, and I think are recommending that I think the best approach here would be to amend the land use procedures bylaw as proposed to address those three items, to clarify how a property owner can come before you to seek your approval of a permit application. Conversely, the opposite would be that the land use procedures bylaw is not amended. However, because of that legislative requirement, if council is of a mind not to amend the land use procedures bylaw, then it's probably best that we remove the OCP, or sorry, the TUP designation from the OCP bylaw, because there is that legislative requirement. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on this issue.
Thank you. Can I just say, first of all, that I've dealt with this of quite a few times at the regional district table, which is quite different. And it was usually over not necessarily land issues, but it was housing issues, what they wanted to use a house for in specific areas. And there was quite a procedure to go through if you wanted a TUP. So you're quite right. I don't recall anything locally that has had to deal with that. So this is kind of an interesting way of adding it specifically for land use permits. So I will open it up, see if anybody else has any. Councillor Chong.
Thank you. Historically speaking, with other municipalities, this might be a difficult question to answer, but with implementation of TUPs, have we seen an increased strain in staff resources just with, I'm hoping there's no sudden flood of TUP requests, but.
Through the mayor, through the chair. So yeah, it's difficult to comment on other local government experiences with them. I mean, it really depends on how council chooses to utilize them as a tool. Some councils will simply have them there as an option for property owners to deal with ad hoc or situations that come out of basically left field that your bylaws have never contemplated, and allow you time to decide how you want to deal with that going forward while allowing this use to continue while you do so. Other local governments take a more proactive approach in terms of how they use the permits and may adopt policies that specifically direct certain types of uses to be dealt with through a temporary use permit. And I think the most common example for that would be vacation rentals. And depending on your approach in that regard, yes, if you are funneling a specific and common use through a TUP process, it can become quite onerous. But if it's more with those ad hoc left field type proposals, then it's not really that onerous at all, because you probably wouldn't see more than one or two a year in that scenario.
So I agree. To me, it might open up a floodgate if we said this, and then we might have all kinds of people coming and saying, well, I want to apply for a TUP for this and this and this and this. So can we be very specific about what that could be used for?
So my answer to that would be that, I mean, generally, if you start to see a trend emerging in relation to how people are using your TUPs, it's probably highlighting a deficiency in your bylaws. So you might want to address at a policy level anyway to, either reduce or remove the use of the TUPs for that purpose, either by clearly stating this is a prohibited use, or amending your bylaws to recognize that something is emerging within your community that you may need to address in a different way, so people don't have to keep applying for temporary use permits.
Is there anyone else who has any questions about this? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification then, our use of the TUPs would be more in that ad hoc sense, or potentially a pilot program sense. Like we want to use this as a tool for like the 1 or 2 cases a year, as opposed to again, like as you said, like if we identify a trend, that would then trigger more of a bylaw review as opposed to using the TUPs.
That's my understanding, is that I think as proposed in your OCP, it's really dealing with unforeseen situations. Council could obviously take a different approach in future if there is something that it specifically wanted to regulate through the use of TUPs, but that would create an administrative burden. But in those scenarios too, I imagine at a staff level, we would bring forward implications of that type of approach for your consideration before embarking down that path. So.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add to this? Is there a recommendation? If there is one, what is your thought on this? Councillor Poderica?
Thank you, Richard. I'd move option one, that the process be initiated.
Councillor Chong? Anybody else? All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. So that has passed. That will come back at some future time. And next we have the sign bylaw amendment / murals. And is Chris going to do it or Shannon? Okay, Chris, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, through the mayor. So another proposed amendment, this time to a different bylaw, though. This would be for the sign bylaw number 1282. And it's a very targeted amendment related to murals, which I'll outline here in the subsequent slides. So again, just to start off, some regulatory background. Council's authority to regulate and issue permits in relation to signs is generally found under Section 526 of the Local Government Act, and it allows you to look at any number of things in relation to signs, whether it be number, size, type, form, the appearance and locations, and also to outright prohibit, and to do that by different zones and also by different uses within zones. So it does provide you with a lot of flexibility. Council has had its current sign bylaw in place since 2012. It does have a stated purpose, and I've tried to summarize what that purpose is here on this particular slide. And the first one is aesthetic attractiveness, but also trying to encourage the use of effective advertising. So I'm assuming that's in relation to limiting over cluttering or too many signs. Limits on the distractions or nuisances that you might see with signs. So that would be what I would call bells and whistles, lights, lasers, other accoutrements, whatever. Promoting dark skies, energy conservation, and then the last one, which I suspect relates to public safety, is their placement and also maintenance. Now, how the bylaw is utilized, my understanding is that basically before any person can alter or erect or put up a sign, that they're required to have a permit issued by the town related to that sign. So that's all set out by this bylaw. Of course, the important exception here would be unless the bylaw provides an exemption for that particular type of sign. Now, with the issue that's before us today, the sign bylaw does define what it considers a mural to be, and you can see the definition here, and it is pretty straightforward. Interestingly, however, murals are not listed as one of the specific exemptions from the sign bylaw. So technically speaking, every mural in town is required to get a permit from the town issued before it's erected on the side of a building. So you can see some examples here, and unbeknownst to me until I started on this, there's actually a website maintained by Destination Source, I believe, that promotes or profiles all the different murals in town. So I pulled some examples here off of their website. So really the issue that's now before the town, with all that background out of the way, is that most recently there has been a request that was submitted to the town seeking a letter of support for a proposed mural. That does present a challenge because the bylaw requires that there be a permit issued for a mural. So providing a letter of support in the absence of a permit isn't seen really to be possible. So we thought we'd highlight this for your consideration and see if you want to provide some directions on maybe making some changes to the bylaw. So the next few slides just outline some of the considerations that council might want to consider in relation to this issue. So obviously, in terms of maybe reducing regulatory requirements and making it easier for property owners to put murals on the side of their building. Obviously, they provide a cultural and artistic value. They allow for a community to celebrate local history and identity through storytelling. And they also just add vibrancy to primarily your downtown core, which I think is where you would see most murals erected. Obviously, the other consideration, though, which would be in favor of the status quo and maintaining the requirement for a permit, is that the town is able to control more actively the aesthetics of the murals, because you do have that design review process that supports the issuance of the permit. And that also allows you to impose conditions on a sign, whether that be thematic or even just basic, again, safety considerations. It's not going to be posing any kind of a structural risk. It's not going to be using hazardous materials. It's not being used as a backdoor for commercial advertising. And that, there's a general expectation that a property owner maintains the sign in not good working order, but up to a certain standard where it's not just falling apart, right? So a permit would certainly help you in that respect. We were curious as to how other local governments in the South Okanagan dealt with this issue. So we did do a quick review, just a desktop analysis of their bylaws that relate to signs. And as you can see here, I mean, it is pretty consistent approach. Penticton, Summerland, Oliver, and the regional district all currently exempt murals from their sign requirements. I think Summerland, maybe of the four, has the more, maybe not as open approach. They do require that the mural be non-commercial. Commercial murals still requiring a permit within that municipality. So in light of all of the above, we've outlined two options that are available for you on this issue. So one would be to update the definition of murals, and to change the definition would primarily be to insert some language around just some basic community standards to make sure that nothing objectionable is put on a mural utilizing or availing itself of this exemption that's proposed. And then obviously to amend the exemptions to include murals. The opposite of this recommendation would be the status quo, and that the town would still require that murals be the subject of a permit requirement so that that basic overview and conditioning of permits can happen. And that's it for my presentation, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that council might have.
Thank you very much, Chris. If you didn't have a permit to put one of these up, how would you ensure that it was what didn't contain advertising content, depict imagery or language that's defamatory? How would you deal with that, and how have these other places dealt with it? Because presumably they would have the same concerns, would
Yeah.
they? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, again, my understanding would be is that if you implemented the changes as proposed, it would be, I don't want to say leap of faith, but we would be trusting people to comply with the bylaw. And if there was a situation where they didn't, then it becomes a reactive enforcement approach. Whereas obviously the benefit of having the permit is you have that proactive approach where you're seeing it before it's put up on the side of the building. But that is creating a regulatory burden for some property owners. And if council have an opinion that murals are beneficial to the community, removing that regulatory burden might be beneficial. But yeah, you are losing that oversight role that would come with requiring a permit to be issued first.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam. A question, I support this idea. Does it have to be the owner of the building, or is a third party could put a mural up?
So through the mayor, my understanding is if the approach as proposed is implemented, regardless of who puts the mural up, it would be the property owner that enforcement action would be taken against. So it would be their responsibility to ensure that anybody putting a mural on their building is doing so in accordance with the bylaw, because I would presume that they would want to avoid any potential enforcement issues with the town if something contrary to the bylaw was put on.
So one more then, is there a bylaw that says who maintains it after 3 or 4 years if it fades or gets graffitied? Who maintains it?
Well, again, sorry, through the mayor, that would be an issue for the property owner. So again, if there was an issue with relation to the sign or the mural, contrary to the bylaws or posing a hazard, I suspect enforcement actions would be initiated against the property owner as the person responsible for that structure and the signage on it or the mural on it.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Garish. Just a question here. In the proposed amendment, there's a condition that there shall be no more than one mural on each building face of a building. You know, we have at least 2 scenarios where we have 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Would the understanding be that for those additional murals that they would be required to seek a permit on, or?
Yeah, so there was some internal discussion about this before we brought the discussion paper up, and we recognized that, of course, we're dealing with something that's artistic in nature, and how you interpret that art could be problematic, of course, in the context of a local government regulatory bylaw. So I think we took the position that even though the bylaw currently states 1 mural per building, I think there's no change proposed in that respect, that in interpreting that, we would take a very lenient approach, recognizing that there might be multiple themes or multiple aspects to a mural that from the artist's perspective might be one piece of artwork, but when you're looking at it visually, might actually be appearing as multiple different murals. But I think we would be more leaning towards an open or lenient interpretation of how that relates to the bylaw.
And then just seeking some clarification on does not contain advertising content. Multiple of the murals will have, let's say, needs is a good example. They are the owners of the building and they had this mural done and it does say needs on it. So, I mean, where do we draw the line as to what is advertising and what isn't?
Well, certainly we can take direction from council on that if there's concerns about it, but I would suggest that if, I mean, given the nature of the report before you today, and we're looking at this as a community building initiative in terms of the storytelling and historical aspects and whatnot, that and if we are removing regulatory burdens, permit requirements, fee costs, et cetera, that really the mural should be non-commercial in nature. Not to say that somebody can't do one with commercial advertising, but if that's the case, they wouldn't benefit from the exemption, and then they would have to come in for a permit, or conceivably, if it doesn't meet other aspects of the bylaw, potentially a variance, I suspect, to the requirements of the bylaw. So you would still have a chance to see it. But I think really what's being proposed today with the exemption is that it's for non-commercial type murals. So no commercial advertising included.
Anybody else? Anybody like to make a motion here, a recommendation? That the amendment to the sign bylaw number 1282, 2012, to update the definition of murals and to exempt murals from the requirement for a sign permit be initiated. Is you seconding that? Thank you. So I'm just wanting to make sure that that people assume that if they want to put up a mural, that they don't have to get a permit and they can put up whatever they want. So I just want to make sure that they are having to follow some guidelines in what the mural depicts or says. So are we covered with that? Are we okay with allowing that this recommendation to go through and with no oversight? Chris?
If council is comfortable with that approach, it's just as I was saying earlier that we're kind of shifting the onus from the proactive approach by requiring a permit, and with these changes, it would be reactive. So we would be trusting people to comply with the bylaw. But if they don't, and it's the subject of a written complaint, then reactively the town will be looking at potential enforcement action. So it's a question for council, your comfort letter in relation to those two approaches to murals.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And hypothetically speaking, what would that enforcement process look like? Like, let's say
Yeah.
someone put a mural, wildly offensive. What do we do at that
Yeah.
point?
I'll start with the stab, but I suspect it would look like your typical land use bylaw enforcement procedure, and that you would be following the same process as if you were dealing with an illegal vacation rental or somebody who's operating potentially a small scale industrial use in a residential zone, like whatever the town's existing steps are for that enforcement approach would be the same one that would be applied to a mural that's contravening the sign bylaw.
My only concern is I'd rather be proactive at the beginning and say, can you make sure that this is done and be sensible about it rather than have to go and take take it down kind of thing. That to me is the wrong way to approach it. However, maybe that won't happen. I don't know. Anybody else? So it's been moved and seconded. Did you have something? No? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. Through you to Steph. In the past, have we had applications for sign permits for mural installations, or has it just been assumed that it was a free for all?
Dear Your Worship, yeah, we don't think we've received any permits for murals.
I think the first one that went up at the Legion, that it was dealt with by our planning department here. And then there were other ones. So I do know that there was something that happened then. However, as you know, we have had a request to allow a mural to go up quite recently. So that's kind of what triggered this. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that in the past, enforcement of bad actors with short-term rentals. I mean, short-term rentals aren't allowed anyways, but it's been difficult, time-consuming, consuming of staff resources. So I would just like a little bit more clarification of if someone does put a wildly offensive mural up, what would that process? Could you just give a brief summary of what that process would look like?
And sort of how would the town deal with it? That's, yeah.
So the process would be that we would contact the owner via letter, advise what's in contravention, how it's in contravention, and then we would ask for the compliance to come in. So we're not going to come in. Yeah, we're not going to come in heavy-handed. We're going to come in and work with them like we have been working with other, like with the short-term rentals and with any kind of a bylaw that we have had to enforce. Then once we move through with the letter, then we'll move into coming into compliance, removing the mural or having it repainted to something that's more appropriate for the artistic area.
So maybe just one more thing through your worship, like, so that the process does take a while, and it's maybe easier if it's really, really discriminatory. The problem is going to be when it's really
Yeah.
in that midpoint where some believe it's great art and others think it's offensive, and it's especially with the change in cultures. Like, we changed from where we were 20 years ago and 40 years ago and 60 years ago, and what may be acceptable today may not be acceptable in 5 years. So that's, but I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but still there's a pendulum, or there's a cultural shift that occurs. There's early adopters that think, yeah, this is great. And maybe but only 10% think it's great. 3 years, maybe 15. So it's going to be that, it's those middle ones I think we're more concerned with that are going to be likely to struggle.
Councillor King?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess to do it without being, it could be proactive. Couldn't there just be like a review that the person, it can be exempt, but they have to come in and show someone a stat that kind of signs off that it's decent? So that way there's no chasing them afterwards that it's offensive?
That happen anywhere else, Chris?
Well, of course, I'm only speaking from my experience at the regional district, and we've historically exempted murals. But I think the scenario that you're outlining is basically the permit process. That would be the mechanism by which we would get them to come in, allow us to review it, and then issue them a piece of paper saying this is acceptable. You may now go ahead and put it up. I suspect at a minimum we could put up information on the website for the town indicating murals are exempt. But if there's any concerns or questions before you put money into this, check with town staff. But it wouldn't be as formal, obviously, as having an issued permit, right? It would just be informal feedback.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that's a way of being a little more proactive rather than just assuming that because people don't know about it, they'll just put up whatever they want. And so I think it's important that we somehow show what is expected and what we're asking them to do before they do it. So, does anybody else have anything to say about this? So,
Well, through your worship, I mean,
yeah.
one of the other things I'll just add, so it sounds like you're almost sliding down a partial permit process, but not. The other struggle we are going to have is what I think is great art and what you think is great art, maybe two different things. And that I think it's always going to be a struggle on those ones that are a bit on the gray side. Like, I don't think there's a
Yeah.
really nice, easy process here. Like, think of for a lot of our art, it's pretty family friendly. But again, that can change, and there could be just something in the middle. And yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I think this is a tough one that if everybody plays nice in the sandbox, it's a great thing. But art is art. Eye of the beholder. Yeah, and so even with one person with the town, I mean, you can easily pick out some things like,
Mhm.
but
So the only thing that makes me feel that it could work is that looking at all the other Penticton, Summerland, Oliver, and the RDOS, they have exempted it and it seems to be okay. So if some of them had it and some didn't, I'd want to stop and say why. But the other four say it's taking murals off, exempt, then I'm hoping that it will work. Now, if we find that there is a concern, can we then bring it back and look at it again? This bylaw, we could, yeah. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we go with the recommendation. All in favor? Okay, I'm against because I'm not quite sure, so that's all right. It's passed. Thank you. Okay. I think that would be the end of our meeting. The termination 1 and 2. All in favor? Thank you very much, everybody.